This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Roger Stone Show on this Memorial Day weekend. Today we honor those brave men and women who gave their all for our freedom. And while the holiday gets tied up in cookouts and family gatherings, hot dogs and hamburgers, let's make it a solemn one which we remember those who sacrificed everything that we may be free. This week, FBI Director Kash Patel and FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino made comments in an interview with Maria Bartiromo that sent shockwaves through much of the world when they declared that they actually believed that convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. Listen to here's what they had to say.
You said Jeffrey Epstein. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
Now, while I have the highest possible respect for Patel and his work at the FBI, and I have a similar high regard for Dan Bongino, I am one of the first authors in the country to write extensively on Jeffrey Epstein. My 2013 book, The Clintons' War on Women, the longest chapter in the book, Chapter 9, Orgy Island, took me almost a year of research. I read every bit of the pleadings of Virginia Giuffre, who was one of Epstein's victims who refused to take a multi-million-dollar settlement and continued with her lawsuit against him. Very recently, it was declared that Virginia Giuffre, then Virginia Roberts, committed suicide. Frankly, I doubt that, and I've talked about it on this show. There's a number of strange anomalies that lead me to believe that Epstein did, in fact, kill himself. But in just a while, we're going to have David Schoen, criminal defense attorney, who had just been retained by Jeffrey Epstein, had met with Epstein in the days just prior to his death, and he'll tell us directly why he does not believe Epstein killed himself. The autopsy photos of Epstein after his death showed 3 fractures within his neck, indicating that Epstein was forcibly strangled to death. The broken bones included the hyoid bone, a U-tape bone in the front of the neck between the voice box and the lower jaw. This is essentially the smoking gun that proves that Jeffrey Epstein struggled for his life, resulted in an assassin applying enough pressure to break his bones while committing the murder. These are not my conclusions. These are the conclusions of Michael Baden, for many years the New York medical examiner and one of the most respected pathologists in the country. 2 of the cameras outside of Epstein's jail cell just conveniently malfunctioned at the time of his death. Footage that may have shown an assassin creeping into Epstein's cell became unusable as a result, preventing key evidence from emerging that would contradict the claim of suicide. The FBI announced that they were reviewing the matter, but nothing ever seemed to come of that review. Then we're told that the 2 jail guards who were conspicuously absent from Epstein's cell at the time of his death were prosecuted after trying to cover up evidence to avoid their own culpability. Tova Noel and Michael Thomas were allegedly napping and piddling around on the internet while Epstein was choked to death. The defendants had a duty to ensure the safety and security of federal inmates in their care, according to the then U.S. Attorney. Instead, they repeatedly failed to conduct mandatory checks on inmates, and they lied on official forms to hide their dereliction. Or were they prosecuted to make certain that they would remain silent? They emerged as the scapegoats for Epstein's death, were virtually the only people held accountable in any measure. Strangely enough, however, Epstein was taken off of suicide watch. Before his death, Epstein had recently been taken off suicide watch. This happened despite a violent incident involving Epstein in the weeks prior. Epstein was found on the floor of his cell with bruises around his neck. When we interviewed David Schoen, one of his criminal defense lawyers, we'll get into that a bit more. Michael Baden, the New York City's long-standing medical examiner, claimed that those marks were inconsistent with strangulation or by hanging. It was not confirmed whether he attempted suicide or this, as is suspected, came from a scuffle with another inmate. In a shocking violation of prison policy, Epstein's suicide watch status was inexorably revoked just before he turned up dead. Unequivocally, he should have been on active suicide watch, therefore under direct and constant supervision, according to Cameron Lindsay, the former prison warden in charge of 3 federal lockups. Then there's the curious question of his cellmate, former police officer Nicholas Tartaglione, who had been convicted of murder. He was moved from the jail cell in the days just prior to Epstein's death. Now, this was also against standard protocol for high-risk inmates, but interestingly, Tartaglione was not replaced with a new cellmate. This removed any material witness from the situation who could have attested that Epstein was murdered and therefore allowed for the conspiracy to be perpetrated. Now, pathologist Michael Baden, perhaps one of the most respected forensic pathologists in the country, does not believe that Epstein's murder was by suicide, but in fact has declared that it was a homicide. Baden was retained to examine Epstein's body by Jeffrey Epstein's brother. Again, we're going to be talking to criminal defense attorney David Schoen about his interaction with both Baden and with Epstein. According to Baden, the fractures that were seen were extremely unusual in suicide hangings and could occur much more commonly in homicidal strangulation. Baden actually said that on Fox and Friends. I have not in 50 years seen any place where that occurred in a suicidal hanging case. Baden also noted the presence of hemorrhages in Epstein's eyes, which are far more likely to occur in strangulation than in suicide. Baden also said the evidence in Epstein's cell indicating his bedsheet was too low to the floor to explain his neck trauma. The makeshift noose did not match compression marks on Epstein's neck, and that Epstein's body was removed before the medical examiner could arrive and assess the evidence. His accomplice believes he was murdered. Epstein's longtime confidant, child sex trafficking accomplice, essentially his pimp, Ghislaine Maxwell, also claims that she did not believe the official story that says that she was murdered. But strangely enough, she has also now been charged with conspiracy, a prosecution in which, of course, no other conspirator has been named. In my view, Jeffrey Epstein was working for the intelligence services, not only ours, but those of other nations. And when we come back, I will tell you why I believe that. Also, as I say, we have David Schoen, criminal defense lawyer who had met with Jeffrey Epstein just in the days prior to his death, to join us and tell us why he does not believe that Jeffrey Epstein died from suicide, but why he rather believes that he was murdered. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Whatever you do, please don't touch that dial. We've got a lot more, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
I'm Cindy Lauper with fellow Cosentix advocate, Chef Michelle Bernstein.
We'll share our experiences with plaque psoriasis with psoriatic arthritis, and Dr. Panico will talk about the possible connection.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis 300 milligram dose and adults with active psoriatic arthritis 150 milligram dose. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur.
Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com/Cindy.
BTW FYI. Visit Nexplanon.com RN to learn about Nexplanon. It's an adjustable implant, 68 milligrams radiopaque. Or ask your HCP IRL. Okay, TTYL.
The market's uncertain, revenue's tight, and hiring on hold. That's why results-driven companies are using Upwork to keep work moving. Go to Upwork.com today and start hiring proven freelance talent fast. No bulky overhead. No rigid long-term contracts. Just the right expert right when you need them. Work smarter and faster with Upwork. Go to Upwork.com now and find your freelance expert. That's UPWORK.com. Post a job for free and get started today.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Memorial Day is here, and the one thing that every well-dressed gentleman must have as the temperature climbs is the seersucker suit or sports jacket. It's fashion, it's style, it's retro, and it will make a huge summer comeback. A seersucker suit is one of the most iconic styles dating from the 1920s, and now, well, it's back fully in style. As noted sartorial authority and my friend G. Bruce Boyer has noted, seersucker is perfect for warm weather because it's pre-wrinkled, lightweight, and porous, soft of hand, acceptable patterns and colors, and it's easily laundered. It never wilts. Why? Well, because it's already wilted. What sets seersucker apart from all other materials? It's the coolest material to wear in hot and humid weather. Coolest as in temperature and coolest as in hip, baby. There's nothing like it. It's easily cleaned and never needs pressing. Now, even the original word, seersucker, is steeped in exotic legend. Seersucker comes from the ancient Persian sheer-o-shakar, which translates to milk and sugar. That's the combination of smooth stripes, like milk, and rough stripes, rough as in sugar, morphed into seersucker when it first became popular during the British colonial period in India as the most desired material for extremely hot climes, first worn by British officers. It's this combination of smooth and rough which gives the seersucker its trademark pucker. The cooling property of seersucker comes from the puckering, which raises some of the fabric away from the body, allowing for less skin contact and more air circulation. For years, seersucker was seen primarily as a material for uniforms and was widely used as such, but it made a lasting impact in the 1920s. What man of sufficient caliber does not recall Gregory Peck in his seersucker suit in the film To Kill a Mockingbird? The biggest attribute about wearing seersucker has to be that rumpled look. That's because it's part of the idea, according to Haspel, who I believe were the original inventors of the seersucker suit. There's a definite rules when contemplating seersucker. Generally speaking, solid color shirts of either white or light blue are preferred. Network should be limited to solid knits in navy or black or simple regimental stripes. Let the suit do the talking. Your necktie doesn't need to do so. The classic seersucker suit can either be single or double-breasted, with the single-breasted 3-button model extremely difficult to find off the rack, but always sartorial correct. Now, in the movie To Kill a Mockingbird, Gregory Peck wore a 3-piece vested seersucker suit, I would say that would be extremely rare because, of course, the idea is to keep the heat away from your body. But by the way, seersucker comes in many shades. It can be white and gray, white and blue, white and pink, white and yellow, and so on. I always wear a pair of braces, well, known to Americans as suspenders to hold them in place, but I wear them with all my suits. Aside from the fit, seersucker offers this great variety of color and combination for everyday wear. My number one tip to anti-gentlemen who wants to look like they are in top form, check out a seersucker suit or sports jacket in this incredibly humid season we're about to begin. The other great thing, of course, I like about it is that we can now start wearing two-tone shoes. They're sometimes known as spectators. The saddle shoe, the white buck, all of them acceptable with a seersucker suit. But by the way, there is a limit on this. You can only wear a seersucker suit and the aforementioned two-tone shoes between Memorial Day and Labor Day. And as a friend of mine in New Jersey asked me, can I wear it Saturday? I said, no, you have to wait until Memorial Day itself. In the meantime, speaking of Memorial Day, gas prices heading into Memorial Day weekend hit a 4-year low as millions of Americans prepare to hit the road. When adjusting for inflation, the average U.S. retail gasoline price going into this Memorial Day weekend are 14% lower than last year at the same time. This is in large part because the falling crude oil prices and because of the policies of the Trump administration to allow for more drilling of natural gas and oil. For Monday, for example, the retail price of regular grade gasoline in the United States averaged $3.17 per gallon. That's 11% lower than a year ago. This is a massive change over the last 10 years where retail gasoline prices increased for 19% or 49 cents per gallon on average from January to May. That excludes the year 2020. Gas prices typically increase going into summer and the spring due to factors like increased demand for summer travel, and at the same time refineries switch over to summer gasoline blends, which are more expensive to refine and produce. The president has made bringing down energy prices the cornerstone of his economic policy. Some people think that it is just about tariffs, but we saw in this past week the largest single tax cut in American history. No, it was not a tax cut on the wealthy. It was a tax cut across the board on all Americans. We also did away in this House bill with the tax on tips and the tax on Social Security, and we created a new tax credit for those who buy a car or a truck that is manufactured in the United States. Meanwhile, the OPEC, the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Companies' allies, say that global oil demand has grown by 1.3 million barrels per day in both 2025 and 2026 alone. So therefore, they're producing 411,000 barrels of oil per day, with production sharply up. This is yet another example of President Trump making a pledge and keeping his pledge. So if you look at the three legs of the stool that were outlined on my show with Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent, tax reduction is important. A level playing field when it comes to tariffs, vitally important. But now, will the Congress actually codify the savings that have been identified by Elon Musk in waste, fraud, and corruption? We're talking about billions. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show. We'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. I'm joined now by David Schoen. David Schoen is one of the most respected criminal defense lawyers in the country. He is a graduate of Columbia University Law School, where he got his Master of Laws. He's also got his Juris Doctor in the law and graduated cum laude from Boston College Law School. He was, of course, one of President Donald Trump's attorneys on the Senate floor during one of the two impeachments. To me, he is perhaps the best criminal defense lawyer in the country. But he's joining us because he had been retained by Jeffrey Epstein to fight the very serious charges against him. And David Schoen has written that he also is skeptical of the claim that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide while incarcerated. David Schoen, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Thanks very much. Always an honor to be with you.
So, David, in America, everybody's entitled to an attorney, and when you're facing serious charges, you need the best attorney you can find. One thing I have learned is that former federal prosecutors are not necessarily the best criminal defense attorneys. They're actually quite different. And as I understand this article I read in Newsweek, you were retained by Jeffrey Epstein prior to his untimely death to represent him. Why don't you kind of take it from there?
Sure. I'll give you a little bit of background. About many years earlier, when Jeffrey Epstein went to jail, he called me through a contact with a mutual friend because he wasn't so happy with his lawyers, and he just wanted to get some information about what to expect in jail and that sort of thing. From that point forward, maybe 10, 12 years earlier, before his death, we kept in touch maybe once a year. He would ask me a question or two. But in the year before he died, he was in regular contact with me, and that was because a case was being sort of re-energized against him. The so-called victims in his case in Florida, women involved, tried to reopen the criminal case against him, saying that they hadn't gotten proper notice that's required for victims in a federal criminal case. And so he had a team of lawyers, very fine, well-known lawyers, a big group of them, very expensive, and but he just wasn't so happy with them. So he was asking me during that time period to review their work in the case just behind the scenes. They didn't know I existed, and he and I just communicated about it. Skipping forward, when he, at some point, maybe in March or April of 2019, he asked me to come to meet him at his home in New York. And I've never met him in person before, actually, but just talked to him on the phone and in emails. And he asked me at that time if I would take over all of his litigation. So I didn't feel like I could. I didn't feel I could handle all of that. I had a heavy caseload at the time. But I said I'd certainly be available for consulting. July, he got arrested, and I began, the night he was arrested, I got a call asking whether I could go see him the next day. I said, look, he's got a big team of lawyers he's had for many years, well-known people. I don't think he needs me to come see him, and I'd feel awkward kind of in that group anyway. They would wonder why I was there all of a sudden. They didn't know I'd been advising him behind the scenes. So anyway, I didn't go, and one of those lawyers, a guy named Marty Weinberg, said he could get a local lawyer to go see him in the jail, and he did so. From that point forward, there was quite a competition to see, who could represent him. He had Marty Weinberg and another guy, Reed Weingarten, who were his two of the longtime attorneys representing him, and they appeared actually in his bail hearing and so on. But his in-house counsel continued to call me over the next couple of weeks to ask if I could come see him. And finally, he said to me that, and I was very proud of this, frankly, that Jeffrey Epstein, that I was the only person in the world Jeffrey Epstein trusted with his life to represent him in a court of law. I took that as a great responsibility. I never saw him as the monster he's painted out to be. And so that kind of convinced me to go see him. And so I went to see him on August 1st. This was shortly after the news that appeared that there was some thought that he had tried to commit suicide, a couple weeks before he died. So when I got there, I found a couple lawyers meeting with him already, and I sat in on that meeting. He asked me to, and that was unrelated to his case. It was more related to business dealings. They left, and then the jail psychiatrist or psychologist came in, and this was part of their protocol because he'd been on suicide watch given the incident earlier. So she met with him for maybe half hour, something like that. They were laughing, smiling, and so on. And then she left, and I came in and sat with him. We discussed the earlier incident. He explained it was not a suicide attempt. It was a sort of gag, very poor taste gag that his cellmate had pulled on him by putting some kind of sheets around his neck and then pulling them, leaving a mark on his neck and so on. The cellmate was a huge guy, was alleged to be a hitman for Mexican mafia, former policeman, had absolutely no business putting him in a cell with him. In any event, the purpose of my meeting on August 1st was to discuss with him whether I would go forward. We had a long discussion. We met for about 5 hours, and he asked me if I would take over the defense of his case. I said, look, you've got these lawyers in the case already who think they're representing you. He'd had others come to see him. He had a guy, I'll leave out names, I suppose, but people trying very hard to take on his case. And when he would say, I really want to hire David Schoen, they would find something to, malign me with or something. It's very competitive, very nasty sort of meetings, that sort of thing. And he sent them all packing. Anyway, we came to an agreement on representing him, but I said I wanted to meet with his lawyers, especially Weinberg and Weingarten, beforehand. He said, that's fine, but they'll certainly, step aside and let you lead the case. I said, I doubt it. They've never heard of me. They don't know me. And they're locked into this case. It's a high-profile case. In any event, I tried to set up a meeting with them at the MCC, the detention facility where he was being held, because I wanted them to hear from him, not from me, that he wanted me to take over the case. So one of them was in London at the time, but in any event, they wouldn't meet at the MCC. They wanted to meet Mr. Weingarten's office on a Friday. Friday is not a good day for me, so I asked if we could meet the next week, and everybody said that would be fine. His in-house counsel said it would be fine. And then, Jeffrey asked if he could meet with me anyway on Thursday. The in-house counsel said it's not really necessary. It's not an emergency. Just come up next week. And so that, of course, was a Thursday and the Friday just before he died. He died on August 10th. I regretted very much that I hadn't gone up to see him. But what I can tell you is this. If I'm talking too much, you'll tell me. But what I can tell you is this. When I saw him on August 1st, 9 days before he died, he made a deal to hire me to take over his case. That doesn't sound like someone, for a great deal of money, that doesn't sound like someone who's contemplating suicide. In the next days, I got calls from local counsel who had been representing him in some, minor capacity, telling me how excited and animated he was from our meeting. He wanted to fight the case. One of them called and asked me if I could take over his bail appeal immediately. I said I wouldn't. I didn't think they'd made a good record in the case, and I didn't want to just jump into something. I got calls from his in-house counsel. I got paid. I got, to some degree. And he had given me a task, quite frankly, that related to his financial affairs. It had nothing to do with the criminal case, really, except that, he had been blacklisted by a number of banks by that time, so he needed to find some alternative banking opportunities. And that's what he had met with the other lawyers for when I came into the cell with him, into the meeting room with him. In any event, so I went forward with that. That's only a forward-looking thing. That's not someone contemplating suicide. And finally, on Friday, I am told that he was giving out orders to the lawyers consistent with the direction of the defense that he and I had mapped out during that 5 hours. I had made plans to move up to New York, 4 days a week to work on the case, but still subject to meeting with those lawyers to find out, whether they would step aside. I had an alternative team lined up already to cover every aspect of the case, the legal issues and help prepare for trial and so on. So that's anecdotally why I say I don't believe it was suicide. I don't have a conspiracy theory. But maybe the more important reason is the next day, the following Monday or so, there was going to be a medical examination by the city medical examiner. I insisted that the top medical examiner in the world, Michael Baden, participate in it. It turns out that the family had already arranged for that. So Michael Baden sat in on the autopsy, the medical examination, and his reaction to it was, there's absolutely no way this could be called suicide. He's done thousands and thousands of autopsies. He's never seen injuries like this consistent with a suicide. And he said, the medical examiner couldn't say it was suicide. And so, he said afterwards, he was shocked to read the finding of suicide by the medical examiner just days later with no additional evidence.
David, let me cut you off there because we got to go to a break. I obviously do not take a benign view of Mr. Epstein, having written a book largely on the subject. But our function here is to talk mostly about whether he committed suicide. And, of course, everyone is entitled to a lawyer. We're going to go to this message now, and we'll be back with David Schoen.
Now, it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Roger Stone.
In these turbulent economic times, with the Federal Reserve refusing to cut interest rates, and with Congress refusing to codify the necessary cuts in waste, fraud, and corruption going into the trillions, now is the time to protect your future, to protect your retirement, and to do so with the strength of gold. You can convert all or part of your IRA, your 401k, or your cash savings by acquiring precious metals like gold, and you can do it cash-free, tax-free. The folks that I trust are the folks at the Colonial Metals Group, and you can contact them at colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone. That's colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone. Or for more information, go to freegoldguide.com. You'll be glad you did.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, and we're talking to criminal defense attorney David Schoen, who had been retained by Jeffrey Epstein in the days just prior to his untimely death. When I wrote the book, The Clintons' War on Women, I interviewed the police chief of Palm Beach, who told me that after an extensive undercover investigation, he had turned over to the state's attorney in Palm Beach County an airtight case including 33 underage victims for child sex trafficking as well as statutory rape. Therefore, the chief was shocked when the state's attorney ended up charging Epstein with one count of solicitation. After he complained to the prosecutor, that was bumped up to one count of solicitation of a minor, still paling in comparison to the charges that could have, and I believe should have been brought. So the police chief went to the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, then Alex Acosta, to tell him that he believed that the county prosecutor had either been threatened or bribed, but that he did not believe that the charges were just. Alex Acosta, the U.S. attorney, then conducted his own investigation, whereupon he rubber-stamped the state charge and he sealed the case. It was only after a heroic 3-year battle by the Palm Beach Post that the case against Epstein on state sex crime charges were unsealed. Now, Acosta would subsequently be appointed by President Donald Trump as Secretary of Labor. And in the preparation for his confirmation hearings, one lawyer who I know personally, who worked to prepare him for those hearings, asked him point blank what he would say if some senator asked him why he had rubber-stamped the state charges, but more precisely, why he had sealed them. And Acosta said, well, if I'm asked that, I will tell the truth, which is I was told by the CIA that he was working for them and that I was to seal the case. I believe strongly that Jeffrey Epstein was working for various intelligence agencies. I think he was a blackmailer for hire. And I do think that his remaining victims who are still with us need justice. Is there a list? David, I don't think there's a list per se. In my 2015 book, I had the Lolita Express Manifest, which was published initially by Nick Bryan, great investigative reporter. I also had his so-called Little Black Book. I don't believe everyone in his book of contacts was guilty of a sex crime. But I continue to wonder about the the hard drives and the CDCs that were taken from his safes in New York, in Paris, his ranch in New Mexico, as well as from the safe on his island. Where are those DVDs? Where are those hard drives? I recognize that they should not and could not be released because they're probably quite graphic, quite pornographic, and obviously the identity of his victims should be protected. But as for his clients, I still think they should be exposed. The central question of this discussion, however, because everyone's entitled to a lawyer, you mentioned that forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden said that the scene he found inside Epstein's cell and the markings on his body did not support the conclusion that Epstein hung himself with a sheet. Tell us a bit more about that.
That's correct, and he said it on many occasions. He also spoke quite graphically about the markings on his neck. But, the thing with the cell is the whole setup there and their claim of suicide just didn't look practically like it could have been accomplished. In other words, there was a relatively low ceiling. I got calls from people on the cell block where he was telling me that it would have been impossible given the setup that they said he did. There's not a high enough ceiling to fall from, jump from, that sort of thing. But mainly it was the markings on his body that I think led Dr. Baden to his conclusions. And by the way, he said, he didn't come to a firm conclusion, but neither, he said, could the medical examiner reasonably have come to a conclusion, especially since she didn't at the time, the assistant medical examiner did an autopsy with him. At the time, she could not come up with a conclusive finding for many reasons he had said, and then came to a conclusive finding that it was suicide without any additional evidence. And, that seemed to be the popular line of explanation that emanated from then. And he doesn't buy it. And I put a great deal of stock into his findings. But as I say also, anecdotally, it doesn't make any sense that the day before, that is Friday, he was dead on Saturday, August 10th. On Friday, August 9th, he's giving instructions on following the steps that he and I discussed and going forward to defend his case aggressively in court.
Yeah, I'm particularly bothered by the suspicious suicide of his most prominent victim. 6 years after his death, began to become clear that none of his clients were going to be held accountable. The most prominent victim and whistleblower, Virginia Giuffre, died of a reported suicide. Now, I read every word of her testimony, every word of her depositions, and I also am familiar with the fact that she said publicly, I am making it publicly known that in no shape or form am I suicidal. I have made this known to my therapist and to my physician. If anything happens to me, in the sake of my family, do not let this go away and help me to protect them. There are too many evil people who would like to see me quieted. Her father, interviewed by Piers Morgan, says he does not believe it. I started crying away. I'm still crying. I cannot believe that this is happening. It's impossible. And then for them to now say that she's committed suicide, there is no way she did that. Somebody got to her. So I must tell you, having read every word of her testimony, having her attorney was very cooperative in the preparation of my book, I must respectfully disagree with the FBI director and the deputy director. I recognize that we're all interested in the truth, but there are too many anomalies here, too many unanswered questions, and I agree with you, David, that the report of Michael Baden, perhaps the if not the most respected forensic pathologist in the country, certainly among them, gives credence to the idea that no, Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. David Schoen, I appreciate your joining us on this Memorial Day weekend. Thank you for tuning in to The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.
Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
In 2013, when I wrote my first book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, in which I made a compelling case that the Vice President, Lyndon Johnson, was at the helm of a plot that involved the Central Intelligence Agency, Big Texas Oil, banking interests, and others to kill John F. Kennedy, I learned that the FBI completed their investigation of John Kennedy's murder in exactly 7 days, and that President Lyndon Johnson resisted the appointment of a federal commission to look into Kennedy's death. Here is a phone recording between the newly minted President Lyndon Johnson and FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover.
Two things. Apparently some lawyer in justice is lobbying with the Post because that's where the suggestion came from for this presidential commission, which we think would be very bad, and put it right in the White House. And we can't be checking up on every shoot and scrape in the country, but they've gone to the Post now to get them an editorial, and the Post is calling up saying they're going to run an editorial if we don't do things.
So you just heard the President of the United States refer to the murder of President John F. Kennedy as a shooting scrape. Shows you how anxious Lyndon Johnson was to sweep this under the carpet. Originally, Johnson favored the appointment of a Texas state commission that would be chaired by Tom Clark, a Supreme Court justice and crony of Johnson's, but his aides convinced him that given the fact that he, Vice President Lyndon Johnson, had persuaded John Kennedy to visit Dallas, Texas, and the fact that the murder took place in Johnson's home state, that a state commission would raise questions and suspicions. The President, Lyndon Johnson, then prevailed upon Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren to chair the commission. In his own autobiography, and his oral histories, Earl Warren said that he was reluctant to take on the job, but that Lyndon Johnson implied to him that John F. Kennedy had been killed by the Russians, and that if the American people learned that, it would lead to World War III. Of course, there has been no evidence uncovered in any of the investigations that tie Kennedy's assassination to any foreign power, neither the Russians nor the Cubans. Indeed, Fidel Castro had entered into back-channel discussions with John Kennedy through a French journalist who was a friend of Jacqueline Kennedy's, and he was distraught when he learned of Kennedy's murder, and he knew that the Cubans would be blamed, which, of course, in some quarters in the American right, they were. In March of 2025, President Donald Trump issued an executive order ordering the National Archives to release all of the classified records pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. This is known specifically as the Kennedy Assassination Records Collection. The problem is, of course, that collection is incomplete. There are a number of items that the Assassination Records Review Board, which was appointed in the 1990s to look at John Kennedy's assassination, and the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which was formed in the 1970s to study Kennedy's assassination. There were notable materials that both of those bodies had that have not been released. As of the 25th of March, they have released over 80,000 pages, but many have argued that there's missing materials that we know these other investigative bodies had. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna has headed the House task force to review the JFK assassination files. She has done an incredibly good job. She has pointed out that the House Committee on Select Committee on Assassinations reached the conclusion, for example, that organized crime played a major role in Kennedy's death, yet none of the records that have been released to the public from the National Archives address organized crime at all. This past week, in her dogged and, I think, incredible effort to uncover the truth, Congresswoman Ana Paulina Luna's subcommittee had additional hearings, and among the key witnesses they heard from were Dr. Don Curtis, who attended JFK at Parkland Hospital, among the doctors that saw him there, as well as Dan Hardaway, who was a staff member of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, as well as Douglas Horn, who was counsel to the Assassination Records Review Board, and Abraham Bolden, the first African-American Secret Service agent who was basically framed to silence him when he began speaking the truth about the Kennedy assassination. These were truly bombshell hearings. Dr. Don Curtis testified about seeing wounds in Kennedy that appeared that he was shot from both the front and the back. He specifically objected to the idea that the wound in Kennedy's throat was an exit wound. He said it was quite clearly an entrance wound. But also, he spoke very extensively about the fact that the Parkland doctors were terrorized by the FBI and by the investigators for the government. Specifically said that Arlen Specter, a prominent counsel to the Warren Commission who interviewed him, told him that his medical license would be suspended if he did not adhere to the official narrative put forward by the government. And then here's Dan Hardaway. He's the former House Select Committee Assassination staffer. Listen to his testimony.
For the past 62 years, the Central Intelligence Agency has actively and continuously obstructed the investigation of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy with no consequences for their actions. 10 years ago, the CIA's official historian admitted that the CIA had hid information from the Warren Commission during its investigation. The CIA stonewalled the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities, the Church Committee. The CIA was not forthcoming with the Rockefeller Commission. The CIA misled and slow-walked the Assassination Records Review Board. James Angleton's preferred method in dealing with the Warren Commission was to, quote, wait them out. The first CIA officer I ever interviewed looked at me and said, "You represent Congress. What the F is that to the CIA? You'll be gone in 2 years, and we'll still be here." In 1978, the CIA ran an illegal domestic covert operation involving an undercover officer to subvert and obstruct the House Select Committee on Assassinations. That officer served undercover. That terminology is the terminology the CIA used to describe his assignment working with the Select Committee in a statement that their representative made under penalties of perjury in a lawsuit in 2005.
There you have it, the counsel to the House Select Committee on the Assassinations. When we come back, we'll break this down more to demonstrate to you that we still don't know who killed President John F. Kennedy and why. Listening to The Roger Stone Show, whatever you do, don't touch that dial.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Before the break, we were listening to the testimony of Dan Hardway. He was counsel to the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the 1970s, and you heard him say that the Central Intelligence Agency stonewalled that investigation. In the end, they provided no witnesses, no documents, and no testimony. The CIA operative in charge of that operation is a man named George Joannides. The government has long suppressed any files involving Joannides and his involvement in the cover-up of the murder of John Kennedy. And then last week, thanks to the dogged persistence of Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna and an assist from the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, the CIA finally admitted that they had 7 boxes of files pertaining to Mr. Joannides' activities. However, they want to review those documents before turning them over to the House Committee or to the National Archives. This cover-up, as you can see, is ongoing with deep state actors inside the government continuing, in my view, to try to hide the truth regarding the murder of President John F. Kennedy. The testimony of Dr. Don Curtis, who we spoke of earlier, was shocking. Not only did Curtis report seeing at least 3 distinct entry wounds in Kennedy's body, located in 3 separate areas, suggesting multiple bullets struck the president. This, of course, contradicts Arlen Specter's cockamamie single bullet or magic bullet theory. Dr. Curtis said that the throat wound alone was fatal, that it severed President Kennedy's trachea, preventing him from breathing. Curtis said that Kennedy was already dead upon arrival at Parkland due to that injury alone. He also noted that there was a wound in the right temple entrance. This bullet hole was an entry wound from the front. So he has now rejected the magic bullet theory as both nonsensical and also ballistically impossible. But more disturbing is his discussion of the intimidation of the Parkland doctors. This was also highlighted recently in a Paramount documentary in which as many as 9 of the doctors who are still living spoke about intimidation, about what they had seen, were told that their medical licenses would be suspended if they spoke openly of what they had witnessed. Dr. Curtis also described how the chief neurosurgeon halted efforts to save Kennedy after assessing the catastrophic head wound, indicating its severity. He noted the head wound was inconsistent with the single shooter theory due to both its nature and location. 9 doctors all record a blowout wound the size of a grapefruit in the back of Kennedy's head, yet that wound is missing by the time the body gets to the Bethesda Medical Center. In fact, under Texas law, Kennedy's body should never have been removed without an autopsy. There was actually a stand-down between the Secret Service and Texas Rangers, and Kennedy's body was removed at gunpoint. It is extraordinary. We also have recorded that Curtis LeMay, the head of the Air Force, the head of the Joint Chiefs, ordered during the autopsy that President John F. Kennedy's testicles be cut off. This is how much LeMay hated Kennedy. I still believe that nothing I have seen contradicts my claim that at least one of the shooters from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository was Malcolm Mack Wallace. Wallace was convicted of murder in Texas in 1951, and therefore Texas officials have a copy of his fingerprints. A fully formed fingerprint for Mr. Wallace was found on the cardboard boxes on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. That fingerprint was certified by Nathan Darby, who was with the Austin Police Department. He was a certified latent print examiner. He had done over 100,000 fingerprint comparisons in his career, and he said definitively that the fingerprint found on the 6th floor was a 34-point match, whereas only a 12 or 14-point match is required in a U.S. court of law. Malcolm McWallace is also seen by no less than 6 witnesses who identify a man who meets his physical description, heavy set, balding, wearing spectacles. He is also very recently been identified in an audio tape in which Billy Sol Estes, who was a crony of Lyndon Johnson's, identifies in a conversation with Cliff Carter, Johnson's chief political operator, that Wallace had been hired by Johnson to kill Kennedy. Cui bono. None of these things, of course, included in any of the information released by the government. Also testifying last week was Abraham Bolden. He was the first African-American Secret Service agent. He was brutally framed and punished by our government because he dared speak the truth about the Kennedy assassination. When we come back, Bolden's attorney, Tyler Nixon, is going to join us to talk about his testimony before the House and also what the government has done to him. Joe Biden gave him a pardon, but at the same time he gave Bolden a pardon, he denied him any of the financial benefits that he so richly deserves, having been betrayed by his country. When we come back, we'll be joined by Tyler Nixon, the attorney for Abraham Bolden, the first African-American Secret Service agent who testified in Washington, D.C. last week.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome. We're back on the Roger Stone Show. We're talking about last week's hearing of the U.S. House Task Force on declassification of the documents pertaining to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Well, one of the notable and most compelling witnesses was Douglas Horne, former senior analyst for the Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board, who claimed yet again that he believed that JFK was shot multiple times in the head with skull x-rays showing unambiguous and clear evidence of 2 headshots fired from in front of the president. It's interesting that the Warren Commission was never actually given the autopsy photos. They were given artists' renderings of the autopsy photos. The man who helped arrange for Douglas Horne to appear as a witness is joining us now, Tyler Nixon. Tyler Nixon is an attorney, an activist, has represented me personally. He is also a keen and accomplished researcher on the Kennedy assassination. He specifically represents Abraham Bolden, the first African-American civil Secret Service agent who testified most compellingly last week, but who, frankly, has not been treated well by his government. Joe Biden pardoned Bolden for trumped-up charges that were filed against him in order to silence and discredit him about his view of what happened on November 22nd, 1963. But that turns out to be a cynical ploy for votes, and there was really none of the benefits that this gentleman, Mr. Bolden, deserves is he going to get, unless, of course, President Trump decides to take action. Anyway, Tyler Nixon, thanks for joining us in the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, it's great to be with you, as always. I appreciate your having me on.
I think this is a great opportunity for you to tell the story of Abraham Bolden, even though last week's hearing was televised and was certainly accessible online. Many don't know the story of this bold American and how his government has mistreated him. So I'm going to lay back here a little bit and tell us about Abraham Bolden.
Sure, and for those who are watching the hearing, unfortunately, it's like this man has waited 62 years to tell his story, and we had an audio problem with the initial his initial statement. So if anyone who didn't catch his audio opening can go back, and they've reposted, they fixed the audio, and it sounds great. But Abraham Bolden is really an American hero in many ways. I mean, he's the first African-American Secret Service agent ever to serve on presidential protection, which he was chosen for personally by President Kennedy in April of 1961, when, as fate would have it, he joined the Secret Service in October of 60 and encountered, I mean, we talk about racism today. I mean, people have no clue when they throw around the term racist today what it was like for someone like Abraham Bolden to go into an all-white Secret Service filled with Southerners in the early 1960s. I mean, it was serious racism. It was the sort of lynch mob kind of racism. And so Abraham meets President Kennedy by fate because they stuck him in a washroom. He was a full Secret Service agent. He had been an Illinois State Trooper. Done undercover work, was the first black detective on the Illinois State Police Investigative Division. It was the first black Pinkerton detective. So he had a lot of experience doing undercover work, investigations as a law enforcement officer. So he joins the Secret Service. President Kennedy comes to town April of 61. They assign him to guard a washroom in the basement of the McCormick's place rather than up in the ballroom. One extra eagle-eyed Secret Service agent protecting the president's life. They thought it'd be funny to, put a black agent down and make him guard bathroom, basically. Well, I guess they didn't realize that Kennedy, he may be the leader of the free world, but he also is a human being. So as soon as the limousine pulls up, the motorcade pulls up with Mayor Daley and the whole retinue, Kennedy has to use the washroom. He wants to, relieve himself or whatever, freshen up before he takes the stage to the 2000 Cook County Democrat stalwarts who helped him get elected. And he runs into Abraham Bolden, and he asks, "Are you one of Mayor Daley's finest?" And he says, "No, sir, I'm a Secret Service agent." And Kennedy asked, I believe, whoever the head of the detail was at that time, he asked his name. He said, his name is Abraham Bolden. He said, "Mr. Bolden, has there ever been a black Secret Service agent that served on the White House detail?" And he said, "Not that I know of, Mr. President." And he said, "Would you like to be the first?" And he said, "Yes, sir, Mr. President." So 6 weeks later, he walked into history on June 5th, 1961, as the first agent ever to guard a president. And what he walked into was a total buzzsaw of racism, laxity, drinking, antipathy, if not outright hostility towards Kennedy. It was a mess. It really was. When he arrived, he was able to, because he was in such close proximity to President Kennedy. Kennedy treated everybody equally, and he gave him very good treatment, let's just say. He called him the Jackie Robinson of the Secret Service. He introduced him that way to everybody from Pierre Salinger to his brother, to visiting dignitaries like, I think Senator Goldwater was up there. And, President Kennedy, because, again, the close proximity, he would frequently stop and chat Abe up and ask him what he thought of racism in America. And what this impressed upon Abraham was that what a human and decent and good man Kennedy was deep down. I mean, obviously he was wealthy, he was privileged, but he really did care about people, and he really did try to connect with people individually. Now, by contrast, you have Lyndon Johnson, the vice president, who is I'll recount one of Abraham's stories from that same month. It was the end of the month, June 29th, 1961. It was in the evening time, and the Secret Service agents had, because of their sort of laxity, they would just, if they thought the family had gone up to the quarters or Kennedy had gone up to the personal quarters, they would just go out and drink and have dinner, and they'd leave one guy on duty. Well, Abraham Bolden was the guy left on duty. Well, up rolls a big black limousine, and out comes Lyndon Johnson, slams the limousine door, and literally beelines for the Oval Office where Bobby Kennedy and Jack Kennedy were, having their evening conference, whatever, talking about the day. And Johnson goes in and launches into a tirade, and I mean, expletives not deleted, let's just say. I mean, it was vulgarity, it was threats, and it was, I can't say it on the air because we're obviously on a broadcast station, but it was essentially you better quit effing with me about this GD Cotton. And that's what Abraham remembers him saying. And, he didn't have any context for what he heard, but what he heard was so threatening to President Kennedy in this fulminating tirade against Jack and Bobby Kennedy that Abraham actually reported it to his shift supervisor as a security threat to the president. So, there you have it. That's Lyndon Johnson.
This, of course, would have been at a time that Johnson's involvement in cotton contracts with Billy Salas just would have been under review. So it would not be unfair to speculate that perhaps that's what they were talking about. Robert Kennedy, by November 22nd, 1963, the Attorney General had begun telling people that Johnson would be dropped from the 64 ticket and would be facing a criminal prosecution. It's interesting that Evelyn Lincoln, the President Kennedy's personal secretary, wrote on the plane and later in a formal letter when asked to list those she suspected were involved in the murder of her beloved boss. First on the list was good old LBJ. In any event, I don't want to lose the thread here of Abraham Bolden. We got about 2 minutes before we have to go to the break, so let's continue with Abraham Bolden's story.
Sure. Bolden encounters, as I said, deep racism, very virulent racism, using the N-word on him constantly. He was the only guy in the whole outfit, and there were racist Southerners on the White House detail, and unfortunately no one would stand up for it. He stood up for himself. I mean, he was not one to take that lightly. So he encountered that, and he became disillusioned. He was offered by President Kennedy to stay permanently on the White House detail, and he realized that he couldn't live with it. He could not constantly 24 hours a day be exposed to that kind of just openly racist attitudes. And President Kennedy, as you know, he can only do so much. As I said, he could issue an executive order to integrate the federal workforce, but he can't make men stop hating, for racial reasons. And so Abraham goes back to Chicago, and while he was also in the White House detail, he witnessed a lot of drinking, laxity, misconduct. I mean, just a whole litany of regulatory violations for the Secret Service. Conduct that put the president's life at risk at times. I mean, he said that when they would go out for dinner, he was the only Secret Service agent when Johnson came in the White House at that time. Now they had obviously the uniform service, but he was concerned about this. He reported this to U.E. Bauman, who was the chief of the Secret Service, but U.E. Bauman was leaving at almost at the same time as Abe was leaving the White House in summer of '61, and James Rowley would be the new chief of the Secret Service. He was the head of the White House detail. So Abe's reports of the drinking, the laxity, the racism, and all this, Rowley oversaw that. So when he took over the Secret Service, there was nothing going to be done about that. So Abe returns to Chicago. He begins doing anti-counterfeiting operations. He does undercover work. He's considered the top agent in Chicago by the head of the acting special agent in charge of the Chicago office, and he is commended twice at least for major busts that he did. So in the lead up to the assassination in fall of '63, they had threats. In March '63, there were threats against President Kennedy involving potentially what they called Puerto Rican gunmen. And you can check out our friend Vince Palomara's book, the plot to kill President Kennedy in Chicago.
Tyler, we got to go to a quick break. We'll come right back with lawyer Tyler Nixon, the continued story of Secret Service agent Abraham Bolden.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And we're back with attorney Tyler Nixon. Tyler, we have about 8 minutes left. We were talking about the first African-American assigned to a Secret Service Presidential Protection Detail, Abraham Bolden. Let's get to the worst part of this. Bolden would be essentially framed for crimes he did not commit in order to silence him. Tyler, lay it out for us.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Roger. And I want to thank you, by the way, on behalf of Douglas Horn, who appeared before the Representative Luna's task force. You were instrumental in making that happen. I believe you're instrumental in Abraham Bolden's appearance. And Representative Luna, I think, did an excellent job, and she has great sympathy for Abe. But it's all due to you, Roger, and I must thank you on behalf of Mr. Bolden and Douglas Horne. So, that being said, yes, the Abraham Bolden has been treated horribly by this government. I mean, I went through your trial with you, Roger, and I experienced firsthand, minute by minute, blow by blow, the lawfare. The biased judge, the partisan prosecutors, who were basically working from contrived charges, completely, hostile witnesses and a hostile jury. These are sort of the elements of lawfare. And in your case, I mean, and President Trump has faced the same thing. It's the exact same sort of, there's only so many ways to falsely prosecute someone, but you have to have certain elements rigged in your favor. And this is exactly what they did. Abraham Bolden, after President Kennedy was assassinated, was of course horrified because he had been trying to blow the whistle within the Secret Service about the president's protection being subpar. He knew about, the agents were out drinking. They would be drunk on duty. And they would abandon their posts. It was frighteningly frightening if it weren't, it was comical in some ways, some of the stories he's told about how they would, they literally handed him, I believe, a Thompson submachine gun that he had never been trained on before, and just said, well, just look like you know how to handle it, when he was in the White House detail initially in like the first week. This is the kind of, this is how seriously they took the security of the president. So Bolden was he was not one to keep his mouth shut in terms of when he saw misconduct, he would point it out. He was straight as an arrow. He could have been he was a classic concert pianist. He could play jazz. He also was a trumpeter. He had a huge successful career in front of him as a musician if he wanted it. But instead he chose to become a law enforcement officer because he had seen it crime tear up his hometown of East St. Louis, Missouri. Or excuse me, East St. Louis, Illinois. And so he went into to serve justice. And when President Kennedy was assassinated, he knew that the agents had contributed to it. Even before the reports came out about the 9 Secret Service agents out of I think 16 on Kennedy's detail who were out to the early hours of the morning in Fort Worth, the morning of the assassination. So you're talking within up as close as 7 hours of the assassination. These agents were out drinking Everclear at a speakeasy, essentially, in Fort Worth at the morning of the assassination. Bolden knew about this. He knew about. He also knew about antipathy, statements of antipathy towards Kennedy in the Secret Service. Things like, they call him an N lover, and I wouldn't step out and protect this guy.
Tyler, we got 3 minutes. Let's get to his charges.
Okay, got it. So he gets arrested, charged with solicitation of a bribe. He gets flown back from D.C. on a subterfuge. 2 counterfeiters, one of whom he had arrested twice in the previous year, another a mob-connected counterfeit ringleader. Basically the charge was that Bolden tried to solicit a bribe using one counterfeiter that he had arrested twice, a black guy, to this mob-connected counterfeiter for $50,000 for the investigative file. Now, this is the charge was, it's on its face ludicrous. And if you look, and I've been through the case, it's even more ludicrous, the evidence they tried to use against him. There is not a single piece of evidence. Now, in the Secret Service, they do undercover work, just any law enforcement agency federally, when they do undercover work, when they have the element of surprise, they will use it. So the claim is that this guy, Spagnoli, who is the mob-connected counterfeiter, thought he was being set up by Bolden or by the Secret Service, so he sought, in the goodness of his heart, to call the head of the Secret Service, Maurice Martineau, in Chicago, and report this. Now, they could have set Bolden up to, say, walk through to the end of a bribe scheme, but they didn't. They claim that they made it so he would overhear it and then call it off. In other words, everything, the fix was in. This man was railroaded right to the end. He was put through 2 federal trials, full criminal trials, in less than 5 weeks in Chicago. The judge was a deeply hostile, biased judge, similar to Amy Berman Jackson in your case. This judge ruled against him repeatedly. Here's the crazy part. The main witness against him, this mob-connected counterfeiter, goes on trial 4 months after Bolden. Bolden's convicted after a second trial, an all-white jury. This counterfeiter admits on the stand, on his own testimony in his own trial, that he perjured himself in Bolden's case. And not only did he do that, he did it suborned by the U.S. attorney, the assistant U.S. attorney who was prosecuting Bolden.
So Bolden is convicted. His career is ruined. You and many others recognize the injustice. I began appealing to President Trump to pardon him in his first term. Unfortunately, did not do so. Joe Biden ended up pardoning him, but that pardon does not get Bolden justice. You have 1 minute to tell us why.
Well, what good is a pardon if he's already served all the punishment? Abraham submitted righteous claims under the Federal Tort Claims Act to the Secret Service for compensation. I mean, this man's life was destroyed. He has lived as a felon for the last 60 years. They flatly denied him. And it was the most cynical. I'm going to tell you what, this agency is unreformed, and it's ironic that this flat denial came 10 days before President Trump was almost assassinated in Butler, Pennsylvania. So President Trump's got a real problem with holdovers from the Biden-Cheadle era in the Secret Service, and I hope he will give justice to Mr. Bolden by authorizing his compensation, restoring him as a Secret Service agent, and maybe naming the training center in D.C. after Abraham Bolden, who's a hero, American hero.
There we have it. Thanks for joining us on The Roger Stone Show.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?